Welcome everybody to Astro Hi-Fi. My name is Gabby Turner, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the June 2022 full moon in Sagittarius, which is taking place June 14th, 2022, and it's at 7:52 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., Eastern U.S. time. So anyway, this is an interesting chart because, as you can see, there are a lot of planets that are going to be in the later degrees of their signs. The moon itself, we have, of course, a full moon always means that the sun and the moon are opposite each other. That's how a full moon is created, because the moon is casting back the light of the sun, and that can only happen when the moon is completely opposite to the sun, which is what we see here. So the moon and the sun are both at the 23rd degrees of their signs, with the moon, of course, in Sagittarius. Pluto is still hanging out at the end of Capricorn, where it's been for a while. Saturn has turned retrograde this month at the end of Aquarius. We have Neptune there at the end of Pisces. And we have the North Node here at the 22nd degree of Taurus, which means that the South Node is going to be exactly opposite that at the 22nd degree of Scorpio. So if you have planets, especially personal planets, your nodal axis, or your angles would include your ascendant, descendant, your IC, which is the beginning of your fourth house, or your midheaven, which is at the top of your chart. Any of those angles, plus your personal planets, Sun, Moon, Venus, Mars, Mercury, or your nodal axis, in the later degrees of any sign, you're going to have a stronger experience right now because there's so much activity happening in those later degrees. All right, so first of all, we have, just looking at the full moon itself, let's look at what planets are making aspects to that full moon. We have Saturn here. As you can see, Saturn is forming a sextile to the moon itself and a trine to the sun. So Saturn, which is in one of the signs that it rules, Aquarius, is wanting to bring structure in this full moon moment. So Saturn wants to bring structure to the themes that relate to Gemini and Sagittarius, which has to do with communication, publishing, news, any events that are global in nature. So any sort of global news stories that are, big enough that they're reaching around the world, and a lot of people around the world are hearing from them. Saturn wants to bring some sort of structure to those big newsworthy moments. And Saturn is saying, we need to be responsible. We need to focus on reliability, responsibility. And specifically when Saturn is in Aquarius, it's saying we have to think about the future. We can't just think about our momentary needs, but we have to think about, how are we going to create the future that we want to create, especially in regards to technology and all of that. All right. So we also have Neptune here aspecting both the sun and the moon, and it is aspecting them both in a T-square. So Neptune is kind of the opposite of Saturn. Neptune likes to dissolve things, whereas Saturn likes to make things much more real and concrete. Neptune wants to almost dissolve everything, and Neptune says, let's live in a fantasy world, or let's live in the world of spirituality rather than the earthly realm. Our imaginations are more important than what's real. And Neptune also can really want us to escape. but Neptune is creating a T-square between these two planets, between the sun and the moon. So it's basically saying there may be a desire to escape, but it's going to be very difficult to do that. It's going to be difficult to escape the reality. We kind of have to focus with this full moon on the harsher realities, although because Saturn is aspecting the full moon in a more positive way with the sextile and the trine, which are easier aspects, it won't seem as burdensome. And in fact, in a lot of ways, we might be seeing that it's easier actually to do things the quote-unquote right way than it is to try to escape the hardship of doing things the right way. Sometimes we can actually make more trouble for ourselves by trying to take the easy way out, or escape certain consequences and that sort of thing. There can be a bit of a sneaky, Neptune is an interesting planet because at its best it's about mysticism and meditation and connecting to the spiritual realm, connecting to the divine, but at its worst it relates to criminal activity, addictions, people who are sitting around playing video games all day and not contributing anything or getting anything done that actually is going to improve their own lives or anyone else's lives. That's Neptune. Neptune wants to escape concrete reality. But it seems like, as I said, that we're going to benefit more this month, and we'll see those benefits. Saturn will require us to do the hard work, but Saturn is also saying, if you do the hard work, you'll be rewarded. You'll see the fruits of your efforts. So I think that's something to keep in mind with this full moon. And in particular, we need to be doing the quote-unquote right thing when it comes to sharing our opinions, being involved in communications. When we speak about world issues, we have to be mindful of being respectful and also mindful of, how is what I'm saying now going to impact me and other people in the future? That's kind of the feel that I get here. Like Saturn in Aquarius is saying, like, whatever you put out on the internet, even if you delete it, it's always there. It's always there. And it isn't even just if you put it out on the internet, but, anything that you search online or all of that, it's always available. So there could be something happening as well in the world that kind of reminds us of that fact. But it's just about, we have to be mature about the fact that we do live in an internet reality. We live in a reality where what we say can and will be captured, and, it will be available, for basically forever, because of computer technology and all of that. All right. So we also have Venus, Uranus, and the North Node. Mercury's there too. I feel when you have a lineup of planets like this, we can kind of like extend the orb a little bit because they're all kind of holding hands. So Mercury and Uranus are far enough apart that they're not necessarily conjunct, but because we have these other points in between them, we'll take these as a sort of group all together. So Uranus, Venus, North Node, and Mercury. Mercury during the full moon will have just entered the 0 degree of Gemini, which is its own sign. And it's going direct. It has been going direct since the 3rd of June, I believe. So Mercury is doing what it wants to do. It's moving quickly, it's going direct, and it's in its own sign. So again, we talked about the full moon because it's, the sun is in Gemini and the moon is in Sagittarius. The fact that the moon is also entering the 0 degree of the sign of Gemini even highlights further that idea that there's something about communication, learning, ideas, the way that we think about things, our understanding, our mental understanding, and also the way that we talk to other people and communicate our ideas and beliefs because Sagittarius has more to do with beliefs. Gemini is more about facts and information, but they work together, obviously. We try our best to form our beliefs based off of facts and information. But we also know that, there's a lot of facts and information out there, and there's a lot of different beliefs that, two different people can look at the same set of facts and evidence and come to different beliefs based on the same evidence. So the Gemini Sagittarius axis, does ask us to consider that. How can it be that we can all look at the same evidence and yet come to different conclusions about that? But yeah, something strong here is happening as it relates to communication. And when we have the North Node involved, the North Node is going to bring a challenge as well. So I do feel like there's a heightened sense of really being challenged in the way that we communicate. And how can we, maybe with the Taurus influence of these other planets here, Uranus, Venus, and the North Node, there's another challenge about like how do we kind of like slow down a little bit to make sure that we're getting all the facts before we come to our conclusions and put it all out there like, well, this is what I believe. And then, maybe 5 days later, you recognize that there's some information that makes you feel differently. It's like, oh, okay, now I feel like I've put my foot in my mouth. Now I feel like I've said something a little stupid. So this full moon really seems to be about thinking before we speak and recognizing the importance of the words that we speak. And, how, especially if we're communicating online, how many people can access what we have put out there, and what are the implications of that. So also we have Venus conjunct Uranus here. Venus has to do with how we socialize, how we interact with other people socially, and also our ability to understand other people. When Venus is in Taurus, which is her own sign, she understands other people through their tastes, their interests, like what style do you like? What foods do you like? Taurus is a very sensual placement. And when I say sensual, because people get the word sensual confused with sexuality a lot, sensual just has to do with the 5 senses. Taste, sight, smell, sounds, all of that. Venus in Taurus really loves to appreciate all of those sensual things. And because Venus is trying to understand another person on a one-on-one level, she'll say, okay, for example, let's say I like, cheese. I like really cheesy foods. Cheesy foods are really enjoyable to me and comforting to me. What do you like? Do you also like cheesy foods, or are you not liking cheesy foods? Venus isn't making a judgment about another person's taste, but Venus is saying, this is how I come to understand you, and how you can come to understand me is through knowing what we like in a material, sensual sense. It isn't just about food, but I'm just giving that as an example. Venus in Taurus also wants to know, what's your approach to, how do you get the resources that you want? What's your approach to making money? What's your approach to spending money? What do you like to spend your money on? Venus is interested in those things. And when it is joined up with Uranus, there's an understanding of also like, we don't all have to like the same thing. And there's a greater enjoyment, in a sense, of having tastes that are unusual or non-mainstream. During the time that Venus is paired up with Uranus, we could see an increase in products and services that are going against the mainstream in some way. Some things that are eccentric or unusual, or things that have just never been done before. Also products and services that help to propel us into the future, because Uranus is very future oriented. And Uranus, of course, I think people have already been talking about this because Uranus has been in the sign of Taurus for some time, kind of breaking down the way that we do business, the way that commerce works. Uranus and Taurus has even been bringing out about new currencies like Bitcoin and things like that. And the way that we do shopping has changed during the course of Uranus in Taurus. There are a lot more services available for things to be delivered to your home, for example, to minimize person-to-person interaction. But Uranus also wants to have people come together in groups. And because we haven't been able to do that as much over the last couple of years, with Venus coming up with Uranus, which is a very social planet, Venus wants to be with people, and Uranus has to do with group activities. There could also be a larger influence of group activities, people wanting to get together in bigger groups and finding comfort in that, because Taurus is all about comfort. So if you have anything in the middle of a sign in your chart, middle to end of the signs, because we have the 17th degree and the 19th degree here, and also the North Node at 22, that could be impacted more strongly by this Venus-Uranus placement, where, let's say, so for example, I have Mars in Capricorn at the 14th degree, so that is making a trine aspect to this Venus and Uranus. So this could be a good time for me, for example, to initiate some sort of group socialization endeavor, which actually is something that I've been thinking about. But you have to think about the symbolism of whatever planet is being aspected by this Venus-Uranus and consider how those energies might be influencing each other. And we also have Mars. Now, this isn't making a strong aspect to the full moon itself, but we'll notice that Mars has been conjunct Jupiter. It has separated quite a bit now, so it's almost 10 degrees of an orb away, and it is now applying very closely to Chiron. So we recently had Mars conjunct Jupiter, which really, when anything comes in contact with Jupiter, it really enhances and expands all of the energies of that particular planet. Mars, in its own sign of Aries, we have a lot of planets in their own signs right now, just wants to go for it. This is much about like, oh man, I just got to start my engine. I got to do something. I need to get some action rolling, It's a very bold and confident placement, Mars and Aries, even of itself. And then when Mars joins up with Jupiter, it's even more so. Like, this is coming out with guns blazing. The negative aspect of this, of course, is that Mars can be aggressive, angry, and even violent. So this can, have to deal with those sorts of things. Like if tempers are flaring during a Mars conjunct Jupiter and Aries moment, then they're really going to be flaring. And we have seen, kind of a lot of violence recently in the world during this Mars, Jupiter, and Aries moment. But now Mars is applying to a conjunction with Chiron, which is a very different energy. So it's almost like, whatever happened when Mars was conjunct Jupiter for you, it may have been tempers flaring. Certainly there were tempers flaring in the world. But it also could have been you just saying, yeah, it's time to go ahead and I'm feeling gung-ho. I really want to do this thing. I've been thinking about it for a while. Or maybe it's something you haven't been thinking about for a while, but just impulsively, you impulsively maybe started something new that you had not done before. Jupiter also, the Jupiter influence wants us to have novel experiences so that we can learn from them. You may have started some sort of new learning journey to incorporate more knowledge or wisdom into your life, or gone on some travels, or just done something that you had never done before. So that could be a positive aspect, of course, of the Mars Jupiter. But as Mars is now conjunct Chiron, it's sort of like, okay, now Mars led us impulsively into something. It could have been tempers flaring. It could have been getting gung-ho and starting something up. Some sort of new beginning that we had to start, right? Because a lot of times we sit around and we're like, what's going to happen to me? When Mars conjoins Jupiter, we realize more fully. I mean, we're all individuals, so we're all going to experience this differently, but it gives more of a push of like, oh, if something's going to happen in my life, I need to be the one who makes that happen or gets that started. So we had that push from Mars Jupiter, but when Mars comes up against Chiron, it's a very different energy, not necessarily difficult, but Mars conjunct Chiron is saying, okay, now that I have started this, let me sort of refine it a little bit. Also, if there have been tempers flaring, then Mars Chiron is saying, okay, I might need to heal some wounds here. There have been some wounds created by this violence. And again, because there's been a lot of violence in the world, even if we weren't involved in the creation of that violence, a lot of people may feel like, okay, this is a problem, that this exists. We need to heal this somehow. We need to have better approaches, for example, gun violence perhaps, but we need to know how to keep this type of thing from happening, because Chiron wants to improve. Chiron is all about making improvements, but Chiron also understands that nothing can be perfect per se. If Chiron could make something perfect, Chiron would make something perfect, but that just isn't possible. But there is that drive, and especially with Mars, it increases that drive to like, I need to make something better. So if you started a new project when Mars was conjunct Jupiter, you are now wanting to like maybe edit and revise or refine what it is you started during that cycle, so that now you can make it as good as what it was. Let's say you wrote a short story when Mars was conjunct Jupiter. You'd been having a writer's block, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I have the burst of energy I need to write this short story. Well, during Mars Chiron, you would probably be going back with a fine-tooth comb and editing and revising that short story, for example. So, but whatever it was, that's just an example, obviously, but whatever it was for you that you may have felt ready to start on, maybe you started a new exercise regime, and now you're thinking like, okay, that's what I started off with, but I think a better approach would be to schedule, my schedule leg day on Thursday for this amount of time instead of what I was doing before. You know what I mean? So that would be Mars Chiron's influence is. We can make this better. We can fine tune this a bit. So that's basically what I'm seeing for this full moon in Sagittarius. So hopefully that was helpful. You can let me know in the comments how you see this applying to your own natal chart. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And if you want to see the next moon chart, which will be, let me see here. The next moon chart, the next new moon, I'll have a new moon chart for June 28th, which is a new moon at 7 degrees of Cancer. That chart will be Patreon only, so if you want to access that new moon chart, you can sign up for my Patreon and help support my astrological posts. You'll also have access to some other content as well, but go ahead and check out my Patreon and see if it seems interesting to you. The link to that will be below. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.